A judge has ruled that details can be reported about 20 men who were convicted of child sexual abuse in a series of trials. The men, who are mainly of Pakistani heritage, lived in Yorkshire. They targeted 15 girls over a period of 7 years between 2004 and 2011. Reporting restrictions were lifted following a legal challenge by the BBC and other media organisations. Nazir Afzal is former Chief Crown Prosecutor in northwest of England. He was the main prosecutor in the case against the Rochdale grooming gang in 2012. And Nazir Afzal, you hear the case here. We heard from the local MP listing the towns and cities that have experienced similar cases. How do you respond?
Good afternoon, Carolyn. I think there's about 20 towns and cities that have had this type of model of street grooming prosecuted, and it is sadly no surprise. I suppose there's one silver lining, namely the fact that these individuals are now being prosecuted. We've now got, I think, more than 200 men have now been prosecuted over the last 5-7 years for this type of behaviour. But the reality, of course, is that this has been going on for perhaps 2 decades. And so we're now having a reckoning, in effect. And in large part, it is about the failure of authorities. It's the failure of all agencies, to not listen to what these young girls invariably were going through. And yes, we've learnt, they all keep talking about learning lessons. The reality, of course, is they should have got it right first time. And the only person that knew they weren't going to be listened to was the perpetrator, the offender. And he knew that, and therefore he was able to carry on abusing them in the way that he did.
And in the meantime, these vulnerable and brave young women suffered and tried to give evidence. That the wider issue, these girls were calling out this behaviour for a long time before anything was done.
Absolutely, Carolyn. If you think about it, you may not know this, but back in 2008, the Home Office sent a circular to all police forces in the country saying, as far as these young girls who are being exploited in towns and cities, we believe that they've made an informed choice about their sexual behaviour, and therefore it's not for you police officers to get involved in. If that's the landscape coming from the top down in 2008, rest assured all agencies are going to listen to it. It only changed because of the work that we did and the work that the Times newspaper did in 2010-11. The fact that we were able to bring the prosecution in Rochdale led to this investigation in West Yorkshire opening. It only opened in 2013. And the series of prosecutions that have followed indicate to me that the agencies are getting it right now. But the reality, of course, is that we've lost a generation of young girls who've been left behind and abused.
And looking back at the Alexis J. report into Rochdale's staff describing nervousness about identifying the ethnic origins of perpetrators for fear of being thought racist, how do you counteract that suspicion and that fear? Because it's very difficult for people to come forward if they think that they're going to be tainted or labelled in some way.
Carolyn, 2011-12, maybe it's easier for me because I'm from a British Pakistani heritage that I was able to say these things. The reality, of course, is that it's not their it's not their race or ethnicity that drives their behaviour. It's the fact they're men and the fact they think they can get away with it that drives it. And you have to call it what it is. The reality is that most victims of child sexual abuse will be harmed in the home or online or in institutions, and the vast majority of offenders are British white men. But when it comes to street grooming of the type that we are dealing with here, the British Pakistani men and South Asian men generally are sadly the group that are disproportionately involved. And let's not forget, the ringleader of this particular gang in Huddersfield was born in India of Sikh heritage. So the reality is it's much wider than we think. It's much worse than we think, but we have to listen. You start by listening to victims and survivors, and you therefore improve your services. And I don't buy political correctness. I believe that we've just been incompetent. If we did our job properly, this generation of girls would not have suffered.
Nazir